Hey, sports fans, Larry Eater here. It's your favorite daily podcast, Coffee with Larry. It's episode 875. It's April 23rd, 2026. I'm in the Laren Hall, the global headquarters of Runblogrun and 40s Media Group, and Shooting Star Media, and all the other stuff that we do. Hold on. Um, I'm Larry. This is the coffee. This is the Laren Hall. It's a little better cleaned up today than yesterday. Um, while I was gone, Kathy and our granddaughter Fiona, who had both reached their limit on, I had an old carpet in the living room, in the dining room, and it was old, George Washington old. They became overly enthusiastic and they started ripping it out. They've got half of it out. We've got down to a hardwood floor. It's going to need some work, but it looks better and smells much better than the old carpet. You know what I mean? And so, but my room was used as storage, and I am particularly sensitive to my office being used as storage. There were a couple issues, but they were worked out. We discussed them. We didn't go to bed angry. That's Kathy and my rule. We talk about it. I was a little pouty for a while. Yes. Yes, someone's saying yes. I was a little pouty bitch for a while, and then I pulled my head out. At 67, I can pull my head out. Yes. All right. So, I was at the Boston Marathon this last weekend. It was the 130th, and we started talking about it on Tuesday as I was leaving Boston. We talked about it on Wednesday, and today's Thursday, April 23rd. So guess what? We're talking about it again. Lots to discuss. So I'm going to talk about the brands I think that did really, really well. First of all, Bank of America. Uh, I like the way Bank of America differentiates its relationship with Chicago and its relationship with Boston. The difference is respecting the cultures. In Chicago, it's the Bank of America Chicago Marathon. In Boston, it's the Boston Marathon presented by Bank of America. I think the nuance is important, as are the race directors. Kerry Pinkowski in Chicago, Jack Fleming in, the executive directors, the CEOs and executive directors, because Kerry is the CEO and executive director of the CEM events, the group that puts on the marathon for Bank of America. And he's been there for, I think, 35 years now. And I've seen him around most of that time. I started going in 1990, and I missed the COVID years, but I was even there in 2018 after my heart surgery. So I try not to miss the race, you know. It's a fantastic marathon. The Boston Marathon, um, and the Boston and Chicago competed for a long time with Bob Bright, the impresario in Chicago, and Fred LeBeau, the impresario in New York. Those were the two big battlegrounds. The fascinating thing is that when John Hancock and then their owner, the Canadian company, I think it was called, was it Manufacturers? Um, Announced a few years ago that they were no longer going to sponsor Boston. Jack Fleming, who was the acting CEO at the time, was in a time crunch. He had to bring in a new sponsor. Guy Morse, the first professional executive director at Boston back in 1985. They should build a statue of Guy. He was able to bring the city together. He was able to convince one of the biggest characters in all of sports marketing, David D'Alessandro, someone I find fascinating. Um, he's able to convince David, perhaps even make it Mr. D'Alessandro's own idea, that being the sponsor, in fact, the De Medici, and if you don't know who the De Medicis are, dear God, please read a history book. I'm not even going to get started there right now because my blood pressure is in a good place right now, 113/60. So, and a lot of days it's like 108/55 just because I'm actually taking care of myself. David D'Alessandro in 1985 said that, and I quote, "For $3 million a year, I own the city of Boston for a day." It got everywhere. I remember writing it down. It got into some articles. I was quoted in a few places. I remember getting to spend some time with the John Hancock folks, who at the time kept books of all the places that John Hancock was mentioned about the Boston Marathon, because it was one of the ways they calculated the value of the race, right? And John Hancock had the right demographic, and the commercials they did around the race were kind of 30 something, which was a show back in the 80s that was quite popular. The first few years, Nike was a sponsor, but Tom Clark, the president of Nike, was quoted as saying one time that the expo is too much like a garage sale. And he was right. That did not mean the race was not valuable. And when Nike, and this typically happens with Nike about every 5 to 7 years, they lose a lot of their great running people and they get boneheads who don't know shit about running. It happens at every brand. I'm just citing Nike right now. And Adidas was able to outmaneuver them. And Adidas has had the sponsorship, what I believe is the most important sponsorship in all the sport of running, since the late 1980s. That was Adrian Leake and Guy Morse's work. And then Adrian and Guy in the 90s, early 2000s, redid the contract. And Tom Grilk and Jack Fleming, the CEOs who followed Guy, kept it going. What John Hancock did with the race was take care of a serious group of professional athletes, male and female. Had the John Hancock Speaker Series. A lot of that was done with Mary Kate Olsen and Mary Kate Shea, excuse me. I mess that up all the time, Mary Kate, and I apologize. Mary Kate Shea and Pat Lynch. And Pat was a very quiet person who was in the background. Mary Kate is in the background, but a keen observer, and I always enjoyed conversations with her, but I also enjoyed conversations with Pat once I got to know him. But they brought in athletes like Rob DiCastella, Steve Jones, Toshiko Seiko, John Tracy, some of the great ones on the male and female side. Uda Pippig. The race continued to grow in stature. What had happened in the 70s is the race continued to grow, but by the time the 80s came and professional running was becoming a big thing, Boston, there were a lot of people who wanted Boston to stay in the old school. But they were not getting top athletes anymore because you had London dropping some serious shekels. You had Chicago, you had New York, you had races all over the world who were willing to pay for a decent marathoner to go and compete. Jeff Smith, who won twice, walked across the finish line one time after he had gone out so dang fast and came in, and it was just, I thought, was he going to break the world record? Who didn't know? Who knew? But it got to a point where the race was either going to die or it was going to change. Guy Morse took the brunt of the attacks from the traditionalists about where the race was going. While the BAA and John Hancock may not have seen eye to eye, at the end of the day, what transpired, what came about, was this incredibly beautiful race where it became harder and harder to qualify for, whatever your age group, because there were more runners and there was a higher quality of runners. And people wanted to model a race after Boston. That's why I say that Boston's the most important marathon in the world. 1. 2, the most well-considered sponsorship in terms of running. In Chicago is fantastic. What happens in Chicago with Bank of America and Nike and their expo in just Chicago. But they're two total entities. Boston and Chicago are different cities. They're both sports cities. They both have cold winters. They both have great food. They both have sports franchises, professional and collegiate and high school, that people come from long ways away to see. The combo of the Boston Marathon and going to a professional baseball game is a big deal. And this year, Boston won the baseball game as well as hit the marathon out of the park. Now, why do I say the marathon was hit out of the park? I believe, first of all, the weather, 30s and 40s at the start, 50s, and again, we're talking Fahrenheit, kids, at the finish. A nice tailwind most of the way, or a breeze. I believe the number of people who went to medical tents was about 1,354 incidents. That is down from past years. That's because, for a lot of reasons, no inclement weather. Perhaps people were more patient. The challenge on running the Boston Marathon is that you have the chance to go out really fast, and the hills beat you up. So that by the time you get to 17, 18 miles, when you're getting ready to go up on the biggest hill, which isn't a huge hill by any standards, but it's where it comes in the course. By the time you get there, if you haven't prepared well, know the course, stayed in control, you're going to end up running a shit race. As I did in 1985, 86. I still got to go back and check. I'm trying to think. It would have been 85? For some reason, I think it was 86, but I'll have to go back and check. The stories, I think, are what make Boston an incredible place. Amby Burfoot, the former editor of Runner's World, won in 1968. He went to Wellesley. On his team at Wellesley was a gentleman named Jeff Galloway, became an Olympian in 72, and the leader of an entire movement that celebrated running and walking. The Jeff Galloway training system. Jeff just passed away at the age of 80 in the last couple months. Great guy. Amby won in 1968. Broke the American record 2:14:28 by Buddy Edelin, set back in 1963, I believe. I'll have to go back and take a look. I was privileged enough to work for Amby, and I felt very lucky. And he still does great commentary. Amby works with Marathon Handbook, and if you haven't checked out Marathon Handbook, you should. He was the first one to question Ruth Shepnagetich and her obvious cheating to set a marathon record. For the record, I believe the women's marathon is somewhere between 2:11 and 2:15. I think women who cheat and men who cheat, I think athletes who cheat are stealing money from other athletes. I learned that from Kathy Butler, the Canadian athlete who ran at the University of Wisconsin. And back around the turn of the 2000s, Kathy lost close to $60,000 in support from her brands because of some Russians who cheated, who got away with it. And she really helped me understand. Kathy's a coach now. I see her every 5 or 8 years, but she's just a really nice person, and always enjoyed her company and seeing her at meets in Europe a bit. Just not a lot, but you got to see her a bit. But Kathy helped me understand that when people cheat, they're stealing money from people. My dear brother just sent me a note. Okay, I'm checking on that. I have to. We're trying to make sure we had some challenges with our newsletter, so I'm just trying to make sure that's being done. Let me just see if I got a love note, and I'm still here. I'm not going anywhere. Do we see it yet? No. Okay. I'm just gonna have to stay on that. So, my brother Brian is a co-founder of Runblogrun, and he deals with all the technology, and I just fill up the pages. We have over 26,000 stories on Runblogrun. I've edited every one, some better than others. And I'm responsible for writing about 16,000. But we have a wonderful group of writers. And we'll talk about them in the next couple of days. I want to stay on the Boston Marathon. So where's the women's marathon record right now? Somewhere in the high, somewhere around 2:11 to probably 2:12. I just get very concerned. I think the pacemaking, which I understand why pacemaking happens to make races faster. I also think it encourages people to live in the gray area, and that's my issue. I like to see races develop organically. It's like how I do interviews. I have ideas on questions, but I don't have 30 or 40 of them written down because I want the interview to develop organically. And for the most part, when we do socially in the media or socially in the distance, they do. And the athletes tell me afterwards how much they enjoyed the process, which is what I want them to enjoy that as well. Live in the moment, right? The people that were successful on Monday lived in the moment. The 130th Boston Marathon was a lesson in how to run a near perfect marathon. Running Boston, one must be patient. One needs to respect the course. I find it humorous and sad at the same time that there's still contentions that Boston is an aided course. I don't understand it. Anybody who runs it knows that if you don't run it correctly, you're going to get your butt kicked. If the course if it's a hot day, you need to slow down. And there are many people who run PBs on hot days. But that's because they were incredibly conservative early on. I ran a 2:48:12, 1984, on a course that went up 700 to 800 feet in the first 10 miles, came down, and then went back up over the last 3 or 4 miles. I went out in 1:30 for the first half marathon. And in the second half marathon, I came back in 1:18. And I was moving for me, And I subsequently, every marathon that I broke 3 hours, which I did, I think, 8 times, it was a big negative split. What John Career did is he was led through the half marathon. The leaders went through in 1:01:43. He went through in 1:01:52. He came back a minute faster. Now has the world leader. He now owns the course record, and he's a back-to-back Boston Marathon winner. Sharon Lokedi, who last year was in that incredibly epic race between her and Helen Obiri, where Sharon won 2:17:22 to 2:17:41. Helen ran a 2:18:51 this time, going through the half in 1:11:03 and coming back in 1:07:48. A half marathon time that many men and women would have said, "Oh my gosh, if I could run that, that would be incredible." They both knew the course. They both had confidence from their past wins, and they both dominated their races. The women had, let me just get this right now. 15 runners under 2:24:49. And almost all those runners ran PBs, with the exception of Sharon. On the men's side, it was at 15th place was 2:06:06. That's flying. And everybody up there had PBs. There was no pacemakers. The race developed organically. And if you recall, John Career followed the early leader. Let me get his name correct. No, Milkesa Mangisha, who took the pack through the half in 101.43. At that time, John was 10 seconds back. What was his focus? His focus was on winning. Afterwards, he told the media in the post race that he wasn't really looking for a world record. He wanted to win the race. And Monday afternoon, I was on BBC World Sports, and the announcer, Delphine, asked me, Larry, do you think it's possible for a man to run a 2-hour marathon? And I said, yes. I said, I in the past, I did not think so. But I said, I think focusing on that is not a good thing. And that is the issue. So, I think that marathoners with the great shoes, the nutrition, the training advances, many of them are getting more out of their bodies than they ever have. I think Clayton Young running a 2:05:51 was incredible. He had 10 weeks of training. His coach, Ed Eyestone, told me. Ed had coached Clayton and Connor Mans, Clayton's training partner, back in college at BYU. And I've known Ed for years. Ed loves what he does. But he also knows that these athletes are putting it on the line every time they race. Because some days they're going to have good days, some days they're going to have bad days. Jess McLean ran her race. It was such a shot in the... It was so unlikely that she was going to duplicate what she did the year before. But she not only did it, she surpassed it. The pressure on Jess to perform is a big deal, I believe. Jess seems to like what she does. As it's fun to talk to the women marathoners. Kelly Auger Thackeray, our most popular interview so far. Susanna Sullivan, who incorporates swimming into her running. Sarah Hall, who's 43 and won the Masters division. Des Linden, who took second in the Masters division a week after finishing 150 plus miles in the Moroccan desert. All different roads that came down. Charles Hicks, Stanford grad, who won the under-23 Europeans and now competes for the U.S. Suhair Talbi, who's from Morocco, who is part of the U.S. Army, competes for the U.S. Suhair has won Houston Marathon and set the course record there. He's a tremendous athlete, and he was the first American. Charles Hicks was the second for the guys. Next was Clayton Young in 2:05:41. Then Ryan Ford in 2:05:46. Then Joe Klecker in 2:05:56. Rory Linkcutter from Canada, 2:06:04. I've talked to Rory a lot, and Rory's a lot of fun. And everybody recognizes that he has, the Canadian mullet. But there's more to Rory than a Canadian mullet. He's very thoughtful. He's very aggressive. He loves what he does, as do all these athletes. They get scared like you and me, too. Ryan Ford was in a brand spanking new training group for this buildup. Ryan and Joe were coached by Dathan Ritzenheim. Dathan, founding coach of the OAC on Athletic Club. Now OAC has a club in Europe, club in Oceania. I interviewed Mo Atui from Spain, who ran really well at the Madrid indoor meeting, breaking the European indoor record for the 1,000 meters. Yeah, in this season, I started out with the New Balance indoor, then the Dubai Marathon, then the Madrid meeting, then the RAK half marathon, then the US indoor, then the Nike indoor, and now the Boston Marathon. We'll cover London this weekend. I wanted to thank our sponsors. Our friends at Brooks have been with us since 1990. They've got the Brooks PR invite coming up on June 7th. You should check it out. I want to thank Furnished Quarters, who helped us out in New York last year. Otherwise, I would not have been able to go. And that's our cat, who likes to just be a absolute pain in the ass because he can do whatever he wants. That is Bandit, the Wonder Cat. And there are days when Bandit, I really think sometimes that, if I could sell him into cat slavery, I would. But he's up on my window, just enjoying the window right now. And okay, I'm back. So I thank Furnished Quarters. I thank Brooks. Jim Thorpe LLC is doing the Jim Thorpe drama. It'll be on streaming, and we'll tell you more about that. Our friends at Nike, who supported us through the journey to compete through the Nike cross country season, ending with the Nike cross as well as the World Cross, and then the indoor season going through the Nike indoor and the World indoor. Thank you, Nike, for your support, NikeRunning.com. Our friends at UFOS, who we worked with over the holiday, and they had a great pop-up right near the finish line of the Boston Marathon. And UFOS is the active recovery shoe. In June, they're doing the Adrian Martinez Classic, which is a fun meet in Boston. And we'll be telling you more about that. In May, our friends at Skechers are doing the LA Track Fest, which is managed by Sound Running and presented by Skechers. And then our friends at Brooks on the 7th of June are doing the Brooks PR invite. So we've got a busy, and then we've got the Nike Pre-Classic on the 4th and 5th of July. We'll be telling you more about that in the U.S. Outdoor as well. So as well as the Nike Outdoor, which is June, was it 18th through 21st? And again, we'll be telling you more about all of those. But run, jump, and throw today. Tell someone you love them. Do random active code age 75 on Coffee with Larry. It's April 23rd, 2026. Talk to you soon.